There are 2 DLCs arriving for Dark Souls 3, and there are 2 very intriguing, unfinished plotlines that still remain in the game. And these 2 plotlines, they directly oppose one another. One, in the previous video, was a tale of Londor, and this is a tale of the Angels. That was a story of a dark wraith locked in the deepest depths, and this is a story of an angel locked in a cell in the tallest tower. A story about usurping the fire, and a story about linking it. A story of Karth and Frampt, of gods and men. Miyazaki, the game's creator, he takes a lot of inspiration from the manga series Berserk, and one of the most powerful themes in Berserk that I don't see a lot of people talking about is the displacement of good and evil in themes of light and dark. For example, good is seen in the Black Swordsman and his darkness, and evil is seen in the angels and their light. Similarly, in Souls, mankind were the ones with the dark souls, and even though the gods are associated with fire and light, these gods are dedicated to selfishly keeping themselves in power at the expense of all humanity. So keep this in mind as we talk about the Angels of Dark Souls 3, because I wouldn't be surprised if Guinevere were a boss in the DLC, but we'll get to that. The angelic faith has its roots in Lothric, where Queen Guinevere is said to have raised several heavenly children. The Lothric bloodline has always been devoted to the linking of the fire, obsessed with creating a worthy heir, and their ruler currently appears to be the young Prince Lothric, and engraved upon the doors leading to his chambers are 3 figures that represent the 3 pillars of power that uphold his rule. First, the High Priestess, whose duty it is to feed and care for the noble children. Essentially, she's their wet nurse, and it's clear that these women groom the princes for a role in the linking of the fire. They're not your traditional wet nurse, for one of them begs us to convince Lothric to follow his duty as a lord, and the other 2 sit directly within the Firelink shrines. The second pillar is the Knight, responsible for the defense of the kingdom. The Lothric knights were allowed to tend to the wyverns and fight alongside them, as these dragons also belong as a symbol of Lothric. And the third pillar, the scholar, who is master of the grand archives of knowledge, and of the 3, the scholars seem the most influential, especially to our young Lord Lothric, who was frail and disinclined to knighthood. The Grand Archives and the Lothric bloodline, they also rose together, and the first of the scholars was alleged to be a private mentor to the royal prince. And here is where the story gets really fascinating, because this private mentor, the first of the scholars, he doubted the linking of the fire, and it's clear that whoever he is, he planted thoughts of rebellion into the young lord's mind. So these were the 3 accepted pillars of the king's rule, the High Priestess, the Knight, and the Scholar, but there was one more pillar who served Lothric on the fringes and in the shadows, the Hunters, a 4th pillar of rule, who punish the king's enemies in ways that the king's 3 pillars cannot. These were highly adept warriors, and they were known for wielding paired weapons, and some were so proficient in their duty that they even managed to serve successive generations of kings. These hunters, specifically, became known as the King's Black Hand, and for generations these hunters served the Lothric bloodline, and for generations their rule was clearly prosperous. However, the pillars of Lothric are crumbling when we arrive, and Prince Lothric refuses to link the fire. So bear with me, once I have the groundwork laid we can get into the really interesting angel stuff. So in Dark Souls 1 we were introduced to Guinevere, who was firstborn daughter of Gwyn, the man who linked the fire, and this illusion of Guinevere at least says this:
Please, father's role thou should assume, and inheriteth the fire of our world.
In Lothric, now, Guinevere is heavily implied to be the Queen of Lothric, married to King Osiris and revered as a goddess of fertility and bounty, and living up to that title, she became a wife and a mother who raised several angelic children. And just like in Dark Souls 1, she's pushing undead to link the fire. She's one of those goddesses that uses us. And the Lothric bloodline, her children, they were obsessed with creating a worthy heir. And there's a lot more evidence of her influence in pushing undead and unkindled to link the fire. The path to the kiln itself is hidden behind the Queen's castle, and unkindled are even born with a circlet of the Way of White, which is a symbol very closely associated with Guinevere. The Queen even placed a powerful artifact in a coffin that she thought a future unkindled could profit from. And yet, the castle is in chaos. Her husband has gone mad, and her noble children are scattered and defiant. So the Queen does what she did in Dark Souls 1. She leaves the kingdom, and we, when we go through it, we're left to piece together how exactly this kingdom collapsed from the children, her children, that remain. Prince Lorien and his younger brother, Lothric, remain in the throne room of their castle, implying that they were the ones in power as their rule collapsed. Prince Lothric is described as the last hope of his line for linking the fire, but Lothric went against his duty and against Guinevere's legacy and refused to link the fire. When you approach their chambers, take notice of this stretch leading up to it. All the knights are facing outwards, barricades are raised, and sure, this could mean that they're protecting him from us, the unkindled, but I think that they could also be protecting Lothric from the angels and their winged knights. So this is my favorite part of the script. At the tallest point of the Grand Archives hangs this enormous cage. Within is a corpse, white feathers, and the miracle Divine Pillars of Light, which was a miracle of Gertrude, named the Heavenly Daughter, and in Japanese, the Angel's Daughter. Gertrude is said by many to be the Queen's child. This miracle brings down divine pillars of light, and it was told to Gertrude when she was visited by an angel. Despite losing her sight and her voice, she was blind and mute, Gertrude was still determined to record this tale of the angel's visit. Somehow, this blind, mute girl wrote down what she heard in a fragmentary scroll. And in Dark Souls 3 there's this huge tradition of placing great faith in the words of the blind. So somehow, despite being impossible for ordinary men to decipher, this tale of the angel became the foundation of the angelic faith of Lothric. So now, our question is, what does the angelic faith of Lothric stand for? What do they represent? And it's my belief that all angelic references are related to the Way of White, which was a human faith of clerics, paladins, and pilgrims who are supporters of the linking of the fire and the gods. Let me provide some evidence. As he travelled through the world of Dark Souls 3, the sharp observer would have realised that there are a lot of angelic references, and I'll name 5 and convince you of their relationship to the Kingdom of Lothric. So, 1. The statues in Upper Lothric are winged, and one set of wings even belongs to a depiction of a primordial serpent. In the last episode we talked about the mention of Karth, and on the flip side, wouldn't it be fitting for Frampt, who is this serpent in Dark Souls 1 who was a huge advocate for the linking of the fire, wouldn't it make sense for him to be a manipulating force in Lothric, a rule known for the linking of the fire? Secondly, in the Cathedral of the Deep you see statues of winged men, and indeed the Archdeacons of the Deep wear robes denoting the highest rank in the Way of White. And originally this order was not evil, they were devoted to tending to the flame. And in this video, we assumed that this meant that they were tending to the flame of Aldrich when he became a Lord of Cinder. However, when Aldrich rose from the dead, this order of the Way of White became corrupted by his influence, and they abandoned their service to the gods. You see this in the statue, the angels, this Way of White cleric, it's overcome by Aldrich's filth. Third, the Silver Knight helms are winged, and indeed the Silver Knights in particular are loyal to the old royal family, even protecting this family's manor long after it was abandoned. In particular, though, the Silver Knight shield has the blessing of their goddess Guinevere upon it, even to this day. And Guinevere is intrinsically related to the angels. 4 of her children, Gertrude, Lothric, Lorien, and Rosaria, they have some link to white feathers. On Gertrude's cage floor, Lothric's floor, and shot from the bident of the man-grub casters. And Gertrude's description actually calls her the angel's daughter in Japanese, not just a heavenly daughter. These children are linked to Guinevere, and they're linked to the angels. And finally, when I look at these beheaded statues in Lower Lothric, I think of another reference to beheading. We place the heads of the Lords of Cinder, their cinders, atop their thrones to satiate the fire-linking ritual, and I think these statues are a symbol of self-sacrifice to the linking of the fire. Look at the way they cut their own throats and hold their own heads willingly in their hands. When these were built, Lothric was known for the linking of the fire, and I think these represent that. And the final reference to beheading, to the Way of White, are the winged executioners, who swore themselves to the angels. And their set reveals the most curious part of this story. It says that worship of these divine messengers is heresy in Lothric and unrecognized by any of the 3 pillars of rule. In an attic in the castle, behind an illusory wall, lies a giant portrait of a winged messenger and a sacred shield, a shield known as Sorcerer's Bane, and an heirloom of the Way of White. Now, with all the connections we just made to the angels being supportive of the linking of the fire, the statues, the helmets, the feathers, why would Lothric call it heresy? Why build statues to something heretical? And the only solution I can come up with is that it became heresy when Lothric refused to link the fire. It is said that this is why Gertrude, the heavenly daughter, was imprisoned in the lofty cell of the Grand Archives. Her faith, previously accepted, must have become heresy when Prince Lothric took over, for he was positioned directly against it. And remember, the first of the scholars was private mentor to Prince Lothric, and of the 3 pillars, the scholars are closest to the prince. And it is the scholars themselves who tampered with the sacred chime of Gertrude, allowing her blessed item to be used for their own ends. And in a huge way, the scholars were behind Lothric's refusal to link the fire, and, in turn, Lothric's persecution of the angels. It's no wonder that Guinevere fled the kingdom. And one of the earliest lore questions I ever had in Dark Souls 3, you might remember it, was why an executioner was patrolling a burning courtyard full of headless knights, why this was the scene of a battle. And now I think I know why. I think Gertrude's imprisonment was the beginning of a conflict between the crown and the angels. Lothric knights and winged knights never fight together, and both lower and upper Lothric have corpses from each side within the castle itself. Additionally, the assassins close to the Crown Prince, the Black Hand, one of their rings is on the roof where 3 fully ascended, golden-winged knights guard the entrance to Gertrude's cell. A King's Black Hand assassin, loyal to Prince Lothric, was here, and he was killed. So now we come to the part where the answer is very much up to you. Is Gertrude the corpse in the cell, perhaps killed by the King's Black Hand, or simply dead of starvation? Or is Gertrude's cell door open because she escaped, flown away by one of the winged knights? Or is Gertrude alive and in-game? Is she related to this man-grub, bizarrely placed on the rafters below her cell? Is Gertrude Rosaria? If I'm not mistaken, the first one to come up with this theory was Reddit user Deleted Away, who in particular reminded me of the Deacon's relationship to the Way of White, of Saint Klimt, and also of the Dark Wraith far below and the Angel up above. I am hugely thankful that he reminded me of these connections, because it's become a really important part of the story. So, why is this man-grub here? Is Gertrude Rosaria? The man-grubs are creatures that have been reborn through Rosaria, Mother of Rebirth, located in the Cathedral of the Deep and worshipped by some as a goddess. Rosaria's fingers collect tongues in her name. Some do it to be reborn. Indeed, if you hand in more than 5, you're said to run the risk of turning into a man-grub, but some simply give her tongues to help comfort their voiceless goddess. For Rosaria, Mother of Rebirth, was robbed of her tongue by her firstborn and has been waiting for their return ever since. We talked earlier about how the Archdeacons of the Deep are high-ranking within the Way of White, and we've established that the Way of White are devoted to the servitude of the gods and their Age of Fire, so it makes sense that the Cathedral of the Deep would have been a safe place for Gertrude to escape to, or, at least, why a daughter of Guinevere could reside in this place. Even if you don't believe that Gertrude is Rosaria, and I do have my doubts, it's incredibly likely that Rosaria is a daughter of Guinevere given the feathers and given the fact that she has one of Guinevere's miracles as a part of her soul, so you don't have to believe that Gertrude is Rosaria, but Rosaria is here for a reason. And as we know, the Deacons of the Deep became completely corrupted by Aldrich's influence. In fact, all 3 Archdeacons are characterized by an abandonment of their duty in the Way of White. One in particular, though, he was originally tasked with attending to Rosaria, Mother of Rebirth. His name was Saint Klimt, and we hear about him from his weapon, the Saint's Bident, which he eventually discarded. This bident was a holy symbol, which draws upon faith. You see this bident, actually, when man-grub casters attack you. This exact shape materializes, leaving behind a trail of white feathers. Assumedly, this is a symbol of Klimt's relationship with Rosaria through the bident, and Rosaria's connection to the Way of White through the feathers. Or, by now, if you believe this theory about her being Gertrude, maybe I should be calling Rosaria Gertrude. However, like the other deacons abandoning their duty to the linking of the fire, Klimt discarded this weapon and put his faith behind him. So, if you believe the theory that Gertrude was Rosaria, then she was forced out of Lothric because the angelic faith was lost there, and after taking the name Rosaria in her new refuge, the Cathedral of the Deep, she was trapped there too, once the deacons became corrupted by the Deep. So, again, the Way of White and the Angels would have been cast out of Lothric, essentially, so there might still have been refuge in the Cathedral of the Deep where the deacons still served the Way of White, so that makes sense for Rosaria or Gertrude to be placed there. But after they turned to Aldrich, Rosaria would be in trouble, and you sort of see that when you look outside her chambers. There are man-grubs infesting the cathedral, and they're defending her. They're staked to the walls, maybe in defense of their goddess, and there are bars that are bent outwards, and a lot of sludge around the area, so maybe Aldrich tried to get in there when he was on his way out. So this entire part about Gertrude being Rosaria, it's a fantastic theory, and one of the best in the series because of all the little circumstantial pieces of evidence, even if I'm not totally convinced. And it isn't perfect. It doesn't explain the corpse in the cage, or why Rosaria, supposedly an angel, instructs her followers to invade and pillage. On the other hand, Gertrude taught her followers bountiful light, and Rosaria's soul teaches us bountiful sunlight, a more powerful version of the same spell. If we get more information in the DLC, which I think we will, we'll come back to this topic, but for now, the only thing that matters is, what do you think? It's been a while since the Way of White surfaced in such a powerful way. In Dark Souls 1, they sent an undead paladin to fetch the rite of kindling deep within the catacombs, and it was the start of a convenient way of disposing of undead within their ranks, and they continued to send their undead to Lordran on this quest, convincing them it was a holy pilgrimage. If they succeed, if they brought back the rite of kindling, then great, but if they failed, then the Way of White just disposed of some undead. And in Dark Souls 3, the Way of White continues to use humans for kindling, and assuming the Way of White are the angels, they're presented as angelic, as good, as holy, but the reality is that them, and Guinevere likely at their head, are anything but. They've been using humanity for kindling, and I think we'll be getting the chance for a little bit of revenge soon. The day before I finished this script, user ravenbiter_114 made a thread on Reddit with evidence that Guinevere will be in the DLC, citing an unused boss track that sounds very much like Guinevere's theme from Dark Souls 1. Have a listen. I'd say they're onto something here, and even if it's not Guinevere, it could be someone related to her, so with Gamescom coming up, I expect we'll be hearing about DLC soon. But what will it be? About the Hollows of Londor? The Angels of Lothric? Or will I be pleasantly surprised and it'll be something else entirely? Thanks for watching this video, and thank you to those who support me on Patreon. In the description I'm going to leave a link to tons of other theories, and some are quite different to mine on the nature of the angels in Dark Souls 3, so read up and come to your own conclusions. Thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.